Hey everybody, welcome to Gain Chaser. Today we're going to talk about bench press, how I used to have the dream of being able to bench 2 plates, and now I can do 2 plates for reps. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what my old routine used to be like and why I was making no progress as to why all of a sudden in 1 year I can now rep 225. So if you're interested in figuring out how to increase your bench press at least to 2 plates and you want some good advice on how I did it, stick around and let me talk to you about what happened. All right guys, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I used to do and why I was never making progress while I set up the bench. I used to be the type of guy that when I needed to get in shape, I would just get lean. I would get soft throughout the year, and then a vacation was coming up, I was going to the beach, I'd lose weight. And then, I'd get skinny, but I wasn't really getting strong. And I did that for years and years. I would just exercise to get in shape. I would do a lot of HIIT cardio, and I got lean, but I would say I got more skinny than lean. And I gotta tell you, when I started to change my diet, that is when I saw the biggest changes. And to be honest with you, I know it's going to be a little silly to say something as silly as changing your diet can make such a big change, but it is, right? Your proteins are what's going to help your muscle grow. And if you're constantly trying to just get lean or get cut and you're in a caloric deficit and you're not getting enough protein, you're not going to make much muscle. You're not going to do it. That's what I was doing. I was always benching all the time. I would do dumbbell flies. I would do bench press, but I would always be in a deficit so that I could get ready to go to the beach sometime. And that made me get lean, but it never really helped me get strong. So 1 year, I finally decided to actually put on some real tissue. I gained weight on purpose, okay? That is the thing. I gained weight on purpose. Now, I didn't just eat like an idiot. I made sure that I got all my protein in, and that's probably the most important part, is eating so that you can gain weight, but also making sure you're getting enough protein in. I'm 185 right now, but my goal for my protein macros is about 200 grams whether I'm cutting or bulking. Actually, when I'm bulking, it's more like 250 to 300 grams of protein, but at least in a cut, a minimum, I'm gonna get 180 grams of protein. Nice little warm-up set. If you look at some of my first videos from like 2 years ago, you can see how I went from barely being able to bench press like 180 to 200 to being able to bench press up to 300 pounds once I started gaining weight. You have to eat in order to get bigger and in order to get stronger. Yes, you can get stronger by staying the same weight, but I would argue that that takes a lot more time and is a lot more difficult if you're not a trained professional, okay? If you want to get stronger, if you want to get a better physique, if you want to put on some real tissue, you gotta be in a caloric surplus. I went from weighing, I don't know, probably like 200 pounds to 230 pounds. I would gain weight, I would take like a 6-month to a 1-year bulk, and I would eat, and I would make sure I get all my protein, and then I would make sure, and as I got bigger, I got stronger. My 15-year-old, he weighs 220 pounds. He's 15. Guess what? He can bench press 2 plates for 3 or 4 reps, and he's 15 years old. And I would argue it's because he's big. He's a big guy. Now, if he wanted to retain some of that tissue and get lean again, he could do that, and he would be able to retain a lot of that strength. When I was 230 pounds, I was able to bench press 2 plates for 10, and I could bench press 300 pounds. I couldn't do 3 plates quite yet, but I got to 300 pounds, and I never thought that that was a possibility for me. Now, I'm 185 pounds. I work out with the exact same routine as when I was bulking. I just changed my diet again. That's the only difference. I just changed how much calories go in, but I kept my protein high. You gotta keep your protein high. One of the biggest mistakes that I made when I was new to lifting is when I would try to get lean, I would be mindful of my protein, but I wasn't like purposeful with my protein. You know what I mean? So what I did different is I started having 6 scoops of protein a day. Yes, 6 scoops. I got probably 150 to 180 grams of protein just from powder. And that's while I'm in a cut or a bulk. Then, if I get some more macros of protein in my diet from like eating actual food, then that's a bonus. But I wanted to make sure that protein wasn't suffering. All right, I got 2 plates loaded up on each side. And I'm gonna do this on an incline. One of the other things that helped me get my flat bench up is doing incline bench. Now that I've been doing this for a little over 2 years now, I have learned that the incline bench or dumbbells is much, much better for getting that upper pec strength that you need and getting the upper pec development so that you can really push and get a good squeeze. I'm not saying that flat bench is bad. I'm just saying that I started to see growth and strength when I started being consistent with incline bench. Let's see how many I can do today. I'm 185 pounds right now. Like I said, when I was 230 pounds, I could do flat bench for 10. I don't know how I'm gonna get with this incline. I'm gonna guess like 2 or 3. Let's see. That's pretty good for me. I bet you if I was laying flat, maybe I could get 6. And like I said, when I weighed 230 pounds, I could do it for 10 flat. All right, I took the 225 off. Now it's at 185. What I usually do for my workouts when I want to get a nice, good, full pump is I'll start with bench and I'll go kind of heavy, for me at least, so that I can get to about that 5 to 10 rep range. I have 80-pound dumbbells that I prefer to use because it gives me more range of motion, more depth, and I can get a better squeeze at the top. However, with the 80s on the incline, I could probably do like 13 to 15 reps. So I've kind of outgrown that weight, at least for my first few sets. So what I like to do on chest day is go a little heavy for me on bench so that I can stay in that like 5 to 10 rep range. And then I'll do like 2 to 3 sets of that. And then I'll go to the dumbbells for 80 so that I can be consistent with that rep range. You can grow strength and you can grow size anywhere between like 5 and 40 reps. I'm not saying high reps is bad. You can definitely grow with high reps. However, for me, wanting to get my strength up, I stayed in the 5 to 10 rep range, and that gave it enough effort that I had to grow to adjust to that. So that's what I've been doing lately, and I feel like I've made amazing progress with my strength, retaining my gains in a cut, and also some size. I feel like I look pretty good. I'm gonna be 40 years old this month, and I've been very pleased with how this system has been working. I got a good 8 on that one. Not bad. All right, friends, I just finished 4 sets on the bench. Now I'm going to go to the dumbbells and do incline on the dumbbells. Usually I just do a normal standard press, making sure that I have a deep stretch. Sometimes when I'm feeling really fresh and I don't hit as many on the bench, I'll actually go a little wider so that I can get that stretch, make it a little bit more difficult. Because like I said, with these 80 pounds, I can get to like 13, and I feel like it's too light for me. You can do more reps and you can still grow. However, I'm trying to maintain strength, and with that strength has helped me with my size also. So I'm trying to stay in that 5 to 10 rep range. If you don't have 80s, if you don't have access to heavier weights, you can make progress with lighter reps. For the first year, I only had the 50s, and I still made some good progress with the 50s. So you don't have to stick to that 5 to 10 rep range. That's just what I have found effective. Again, also on the incline, and I do, when I talk about how many sets I do, I'll do about 8 to 12 sets. At the beginning, for my first year, I made some good growth and some strength with going only to 8 reps, but then I hit a plateau where no matter what I did, when I changed my reps, when I changed the weight, when I changed my reps and the weight, I wasn't really making any progress. I had to do a little bit more volume, but volume that was heavy. I don't want to just do more volume that's, you know, in that 15 to 20 rep range. Like I said, yes, you can make progress with that, but I wanted to do it the most effective way I could. I have found that staying in that 5 to 10 rep range and going to 12 sets for me still helps me grow, still has helped me keep my size even while I'm in a deficit. So I do 12 sets. You don't have to do the exact workouts that I'm doing. I would just say, pick your favorite chest exercises. For me, I like incline bench and incline dumbbells, and do 12 sets, whether that's 4, 4, and 4, or 12 all on the same one. Your muscles don't know the difference in regards to what exercise they're doing. They will feel some different variations to that. I'm gonna say that there is something to say about doing different exercises to hit different parts of that muscle. However, what your muscles are gonna respond to is intensity. You gotta make the lift hard. You've gotta make it difficult. If you're holding back 2 or 3 more reps, those are gains you're leaving on the table. Intensity is what you wanna do. And your diet. You have to do both. If you've got your diet on, but you're not lifting, you're just gonna get fat. If you're lifting and your diet's not on, you might recomp a little bit, but you're not gonna make the gains that you want. You have to do both. You need both of them. So for me, the magic to get my bench press up is incline, 12 sets with reps in that 5 to 10 range, and then the diet. You've got to get at least your protein in, at least. Like I said, I'm trying to stay at about 200 grams of protein in a day, and then whatever I get from carbs and fats, I don't really count. I don't really count all those macros around that. I just make sure I get a minimum of 200 grams of protein, and then while I'm in this deficit, I try to stay in that 1,500 to 2,000 calorie range. I don't weigh my food. I don't measure things out. I used to try to keep track of it so I had at least an idea of where my calorie range was, but now that I've done it enough, I don't think about it. I just make sure that I get my protein in with my powder. I cheat and I use the powder. If you don't have powder, you can get it from diet alone. And then I try to have like 1 or 2 decent meals, and then that's about it for my day. Anyhow, I'm gonna use these Eisenlink dumbbells. They go up to 80 pounds. You actually can buy the adjustment that'll push them all the way to like, I think 120 or 160 pounds. It's a really cool product. I got it on Amazon. I think they were 500 bucks, which is not cheap, but when you consider how much dumbbells are that go to 80, you can pay $800, $900 for good dumbbells. These ones have been great. Let's see how many I get on the 80s. I just finished my first set with the dumbbells, the 80 pounds. I got to 12, and that was my 5th set. I think I did 4 on bench, and that was my 5th set. So even with the 80s, if I was to just start right into the 80s, I'd do like 15 to 20 reps, which isn't wrong. However, I want to make sure I can get to failure in that 5 to 10 rep range. There's nothing wrong with going higher, but for me, I found my best growth in that 5 to 10 rep range. All right, guys, I'm gonna finish my workout real quick, but I wanted to summarize really quick the really key points of what my takeaway after lifting for 2.5 years was. First, your diet is probably more important for your strength than lifting. You need both, but I would argue if you were just a big person without lifting, you would get stronger just by being bigger. So if you want to get stronger, you got to eat. You got to be in a caloric surplus, and you got to get your protein in. If you don't get your protein in and you just gain a bunch of weight, you're just going to get fat, and you're going to have to cut that all off later on. So rule number 1, get bigger. If you're not that strong, you need to just get bigger, and I promise you, you're going to get stronger just on accident, just by being bigger. Number 2, work out while you're getting bigger. That is going to help feed your muscles. You're going to get a bit stronger just by getting bigger, but if you're actively lifting at the same time, giving your muscles the trigger to grow, then your muscles can use those extra calories to actually put on some better tissue. So, diet, number 1. If you want to get stronger, you got to eat. Number 2, lift while you're eating. Like I said, my mistake was I used to just cut weight, and then I would do nothing while I got bigger because I just was getting lazy. But you gotta lift in your cut and in your bulk. While you're getting bigger, lift. And then when you're ready to trim off all that extra fat, you gotta try your best to keep as much of that strength as possible. So make sure you're doing that. Then, now when we're talking about reps, at least for me, I like that 5 to 10 rep range. I try to stay closer to that 5, more like 6 or 7, but 10 is just fine. When I only had the 50-pound dumbbells, I went up to 20, 25, even 30, I think, when I got really strong with those 50s, and I still made some progress, but I argue that I made more progress when I lifted a little heavier. There's nothing wrong with doing high reps. You can make progress like that, but for me, I like to stay in that 5 to 10 rep range, closer to 5, more like 7. And when it comes to sets, that first year, I made good strength and I made some progress doing only 8 sets. And I bet you I could still make some progress doing only 8 sets. But when I hit a plateau, I realized I had to do a little bit more volume. So I went up to 12 sets. Pick the exercises that you really like for your chest. Start with like 8 sets. See how much progress you can make, and if you're getting a plateau, go to 12 sets. You need to do a little bit more volume. Some people would argue that that's junk volume, but at least for me, when I hit a plateau, I did a little bit more volume and it worked. So make sure you're lifting heavy enough, and then make sure you're doing enough volume with those heavy sets. If you're doing 12 sets with like 30 reps, that would be way too much in my opinion. That's when you're getting into some of that junk volume. But when you're doing 12 sets that are heavy, 5 to 10, there's a difference there. Your muscles have to adapt to that heavy weight and to that much volume. So make sure your food is good, make sure your lifting is good, and pick your reps and sets according to wherever your progress is at. And I've been lifting for a little over 2 years, 2.5 years. I've never looked better, I've never felt better. I'm 40 years old, and I'm just upset that I had to learn this the hard way, and it took me so long to get to this point. So anyhow, I hope that helps you guys get to 225.